The first time I typed the word into a search bar, I did not press enter. I let my fingers hover over the keys for almost a full minute, the way a swimmer hesitates at the edge of a cold lake. The cottage was almost dark. Outside the kitchen window, the river had gone the color of slate. My husband's reading glasses were still on the side table where he had left them 3 years before, and I had not yet learned to move them.
On a Tuesday evening in late October of 2024, in a small riverside cottage in the Hudson Valley of New York, a 67-year-old retired English teacher named Eleanor Marsh sat alone at a kitchen table that had once been her grandmother's. The lamp she had switched on was the warm kind. The laptop she had just opened was the cool kind. Between those two lights, she was holding a question she had not yet been brave enough to say out loud.
I had spent 38 years teaching teenagers to read the kind of sentences that change a person. I had retired with a small pension, a small reputation, and a very large silence. The silence was the part nobody had warned me about. They tell you about the empty calendar, the way your friends slowly stop calling because they assume you are too tired or too lonely or too proud to be company. Follow me. They do not tell you about the way the small sounds of a familiar house get louder, the hum of the old refrigerator, the settle of a beam in the attic at 3 in the morning, the way the second hand of a kitchen clock can become, on certain Tuesday evenings, the loudest object in a room.
She typed 5 letters into the search field. E-D-E-N. She added a question mark, then deleted it. She added the words project and community. Then she sat back in her chair and pressed the return key with the soft, deliberate care of a woman who had learned, over the course of a long life, that small gestures are almost always the ones that matter. The screen filled with results. Most of them she dismissed in seconds. One held her gaze. It was a quiet welcome page, written in plain serif type on a cream background, signed by a man named Henrik Lowell, who preferred to be called Henry. The first sentence Eleanor read aloud, to no one but the cottage, was the sentence that would, in time, follow her like a small, honest dog through every room of the next 6 months.
Time redefines everything, and only when you understand that does the real story finally begin. I read it twice. The first time as a teacher, looking for the trick. The second time as a woman who had not been spoken to gently in a very long while. There was a small, almost embarrassing flutter in my chest, the kind I had not felt since the year I was 19, and had read a particular paragraph in a particular novel, and had decided, on the strength of that paragraph alone, that I wanted to be the kind of person who lived around sentences for a living. I had not expected, at 67, to be moved by a stranger's grammar. I had certainly not expected to be moved by a stranger's grammar at 9:43 on a Tuesday evening in a kitchen where my husband's reading glasses were still folded on the table.
She did not yet know that those words had been written by a man whose face she had never seen, in a town she had not allowed herself to name in 47 years. She closed the laptop, made a cup of weak tea, and went to bed thinking about a sentence. The Echoes in the Digital Garden, a Porchlight story. The next morning was the bright kind that the Hudson Valley sometimes offers in late autumn. all crisp gold light and the smell of cold leaves coming through the window screens. Eleanor made oatmeal she did not finish, brushed her silver hair into the loose chin-length bob she had worn since her 30s, and put on the cream cable knit cardigan that her husband had once said made her look like a librarian in a Vermont postcard. At 10 o'clock, she opened the laptop again, and for the first time in 3 years, she joined a room full of strangers. There were 4 faces on the screen, arranged like a quilt of small, bright windows. A warm, brown-skinned woman with silver curls and amber earrings was already laughing at something nobody else had said yet. A wiry man with a neat goatee and square glasses was filmed from the chest up, dark turtleneck, jade pendant at his throat. An older woman with soft white hair pinned in a low chignon was holding a porcelain teacup in both hands like a small animal she was keeping warm. And then there was a 4th tile, completely dark, labeled only with a name and a single quiet line of audio.
Honey, you must be Eleanor. Come on in, sweetheart. Sit yourself down. We do not bite much. I am Maggie, and the dramatic gentleman in the turtleneck is Theo, and the angel with the teacup is Iris, and the dark square is Henry, and that is just the way Henry prefers it.
Maggie, give the woman a moment to take her coat off, metaphorically speaking.
Eleanor, what a name to walk into a room with.
Welcome, Eleanor. We are glad you came. There is no script here, only what we choose to bring.
His voice arrived before his face ever would. I remember thinking that it sounded like a man who had spent a long time choosing which of his sentences to keep. I did not yet wonder why.
They went around the tiles, each member offering a small, careful introduction. Maggie had been a pediatric nurse in Savannah for 31 years and had recently lost her last patient to time. Theo had been an investigative journalist for a regional newspaper that no longer existed and was writing, in his own words, a memoir nobody had asked for. Iris had drawn botanical illustrations for 40 years and was, she said quietly, deciding whether to paint one more season. Henry simply said that he was the one who had built this room and that he hoped he would be useful. That night, after the call ended, Eleanor took down the small leather notebook she had carried for 30 years. It was bound in oxblood, her late husband's initials embossed in faded gold on the cover. She opened it to a fresh page, and she copied out, in her precise teacher's hand, the sentence she had read aloud the night before.
Time redefines everything, and only when you understand that does the real story finally begin.
She underlined it once, slowly, with a fountain pen the color of dried plums. Then she sat back and looked at the sentence the way she had once looked at the opening lines of the novel she taught, trying to decide whether the writer had earned them.
I told myself the sentence was overwritten, that a man who built welcome pages was probably the kind of man who collected aphorisms the way other men collected stamps. I told myself I was too old to be moved by a stranger's grammar. I told myself a great many things that night, and I closed the notebook on every single one of them.
But she did not throw the sentence away. She kept it, the way teachers keep the small things, just in case. A week later, in their second video circle, Henry made a proposal in his quiet, audio-only voice. He suggested that each member of the group take on a small project together. He called it Memory Cartography. The idea was simple enough to sound impossible. Each of them, in their own time, would draw or describe a single map, not of a place that existed, but of a place that no longer did. A street, a garden, a hospital ward, a childhood kitchen. Anywhere that had once been real and was real now only inside one person.
We do not have to share what hurts, only what we are willing to keep.
Lord Henry, you are going to make me cry before lunch.
That is sort of the business model, Maggie.
The others agreed, one by one. Eleanor agreed last, and only after a small pause that Henry, somewhere on the other side of the dark square, did not press her about. When the call ended, she stayed at the kitchen table for a long while, looking at the cursor blinking in an empty document.
I typed 2 words into the document. Ironwood Hollow. The town I had not named to anyone, not to my husband, not to my closest friend, not to a single one of my students in 47 years. I looked at those 2 words for almost a minute. Then I selected them, and I deleted them, and I closed the laptop with both hands.
The first member to share a map was Maggie. She held a folded piece of butcher paper up to her camera with both hands, and on it, in soft pencil and watercolor, she had drawn the pediatric oncology ward at Memorial Children's, the hospital that had been demolished in 2021 to make room for a parking structure. There were 8 beds along the long wall, each labeled with a small initial. There was a window with a curtain pulled to one side, where a nurse named Maggie had once watched a snowstorm with a 6-year-old who would not see another one.
I drew the curtain because she liked the curtain. She used to say it was the only thing in the whole hospital that looked like home. I never told her grown-ups thought that was a sad thing to say. I just agreed with her.
The room was quiet. Theo took off his glasses and polished them on his turtleneck for longer than the smudge required. Iris closed her eyes once, slowly, and opened them again. Eleanor felt something move under her ribs that she had not felt in a long time. It was not exactly grief, it was the warmer, more dangerous thing on the other side of grief, which is the wish to be known.
I understood, watching Maggie hold up that piece of paper, that I had spent my entire career teaching teenagers to read the maps other people drew, and that I had never once drawn one of my own. I had taught Faulkner. I had taught Morrison. I had taught the careful sentences of Marilyn Robinson and the unhurried geographies of Wendell Berry. I had stood in front of 3 generations of teenagers and asked them, in my teacher's even voice, what the writer had been brave enough to put on the page. I had never once, in 38 years, asked myself that question. The map I would have had to draw, if I had drawn one, was a map I had agreed, at the age of 20, never to look at.
At the end of that session, Theo, who had been quiet through most of Maggie's map, leaned closer to his camera in the way a man leans toward a question he has been carrying.
Henry, I am going to ask the thing nobody has asked. We have been meeting for a month. None of us has seen your face. I am not accusing, I am asking.
There is a poet, Theo, who wrote that a man should be able to enter a room without bringing his portrait. I have never been able to live up to that line, but I keep trying.
That is a beautiful sentence, Henry. I would like to know who wrote it.
Someone who understood why I am answering the way I am.
There was a small, careful silence on the call, the kind that arrives when a question has been answered without being answered. Maggie laughed nervously. Iris said nothing. Eleanor watched the dark tile labeled Henry and felt, for the first time, the thinnest possible thread of suspicion, no thicker than a strand of hair, settle across her chest.
I want to tell you something I have never told anyone. Not because it is dramatic, but because I am beginning to understand that the things we do not say grow heavier the longer we keep them. My father was a Union safety inspector. He worked the coal seams in the Appalachian foothills of western Pennsylvania, in a town I will not name yet, because I have not yet earned the right to say it out loud. When I was 20 years old, in the late summer of 1977, my father came home from his shift with mud on his boots and a kind of quiet on his face that I had not seen before. He sat at the kitchen table, and he told my mother that he was going to file a report on the foreman, a man named Lowell, whose negligence had killed a young miner the week before. My mother did not say anything. She just got up and started packing a small canvas bag. 3 nights later, 2 windows of our house were broken. A week after that, my father lost his job. A month after that, we loaded the station wagon at 3 in the morning, and we drove east until the mountains flattened out. I remember the smell of coal dust on my mother's coat. I remember the way the headlights caught the empty Main Street as we pulled out, the boarded pharmacy on the corner, the tilted lamppost that had never been fixed. I remember, most of all, my father's hands on the wheel, and the way he never once looked back. I have not driven west of the Susquehanna since. I have not said the name of the town to a single person. I have kept one postcard in a shoebox under my bed for 47 years. I have never written about it. I have never taught it. I have never even cried about it properly. I have simply kept it.
At the next gathering, it was Iris who shared. She held up a small watercolor, no larger than a paperback book, of a back garden somewhere in coastal Maine. There were foxgloves along a low stone wall, a pear tree that had not survived a storm in 1998, and a wooden bench her sister had carved before her sister had died.
A place keeps the shape of who you were when you left it. That is the only thing I have learned that I am sure of. Everything else I am still asking.
The group went very still. Theo looked away from the camera. Maggie put her hand to her mouth. Henry, on the dark tile, made a small sound that might have been agreement, or might have been the beginning of something he chose not to say.
I wrote Iris's sentence into my notebook that night. Underneath the anchor, underneath everything, a place keeps the shape of who you were when you left it. I did not know yet that I was being prepared. I thought I was simply being moved.
The first crack arrived at 1:14 in the morning on a Sunday. Eleanor was already asleep when her phone buzzed 3 times in quick succession on the nightstand. She fumbled for her glasses. The first message was from Maggie. The second was from Theo. The third was a screenshot.
Eleanor, sweetheart, are you awake? Somebody screenshotted the member roster, the whole list. Real names, real cities, real ages. It is on a skeptic forum. Theo found it 10 minutes ago. We are panicking.
It was an internal document. Only Henry had the master file. I am not accusing anyone. I am stating a fact about access. We need answers tonight.
Eleanor sat up in her bed, the blue glow of the phone painting her face. She read the screenshot 3 times. Her own name, her own city, her own age, all of it laid out in a public thread, beneath a comment from a stranger who had written one mocking sentence about lonely retirees and the algorithms that farm them.
I had been awake in the middle of the night with bad news many times in my life. The night my father lost his job. The night my husband did not wake up. But I had never been awake in the middle of the night with bad news that came through a screen, and was therefore, somehow, both very far away and very close to my pillow at the same time.
Henry called an emergency video circle at 2 in the morning. 3 tiles lit up. Eleanor in her cardigan over her nightgown. Maggie still in her makeup. Theo, perfectly composed, as if he had been waiting for this hour his entire life. Henry, of course, dark.
Henry, either you or someone with your access leaked that document. There is no third option.
Theo, that is not fair. You have no proof. You have a feeling. And a feeling is not a fact.
A feeling is what you bring to a hospital ward, Maggie. A pattern is what you bring to a leak.
Theo, I did not leak the document. I am not going to ask you to believe me tonight. I am only going to ask that you stay in the room while we figure out what happened.
Theo did not answer for almost a full minute. Maggie cried, then apologized for crying, then cried again. Eleanor, from her side of the call, said nothing. She was watching her own face in the small preview window in the corner of the screen, and she was thinking, with a clarity that surprised her, that she had walked into another room where the people would eventually leave her, and that this time it would happen faster, because rooms made of light leave faster than rooms made of wood.
I had come here to escape the loneliness. I was watching the loneliness arrive in a new costume.
After the call ended, Eleanor did not go back to sleep. She lit a single candle on the kitchen table, the way her grandmother had once lit candles during storms, and she opened the Oxblood notebook to the underlined sentence.
I read the anchor sentence again, by candlelight, the way one reads a letter from a person who may or may not be honest. Time redefines everything, and only when you understand that does the real story finally begin. And I asked myself, sitting there in the kitchen of a house I had once shared with a man who was no longer in it, whether I had simply joined another chronicle that would end the same way the others had ended. In a quiet exit, in a closed door, in a sentence underlined and then forgotten. I did not have an answer. I had only the candle, and the cursor blinking on the closed laptop, and the very small thought, no larger than a moth, that I owed myself one more honest question before I gave up on the room.
At 7 in the morning, Eleanor opened her laptop and did something she had not done since her husband had been alive and ill, when she had once spent 3 weeks reading every medical journal article on a single rare disease. She brought the patience of a teacher and the suspicion of a frightened woman to the same task. She opened Henry's profile photograph, the only image of him the community possessed, and she began to study it the way she would have studied a difficult poem. The photograph itself was unremarkable. It showed Henry, or a man the community had been told was Henry, from behind, walking down an empty small-town main street at what looked like late afternoon. Charcoal sweater, dark trousers, hands in pockets. The man was not the subject. The street was the subject. Eleanor zoomed in. She zoomed in again. She enlarged the image until the pixels began to soften into squares. And then she began to take notes in her oxblood notebook, with the same fountain pen she had used to underline the anchor sentence. A boarded storefront on the left, a chipped pharmacy sign, cursive lettering, pale green paint flaking, a lamppost tilted at maybe 4 degrees off vertical, a black metal railing along a low concrete porch, a bare maple tree with one broken branch.
I was not, at that moment, accusing Henry of anything. I was simply doing what I had spent 38 years teaching my students to do. I was reading the background, because in any honest text, the background is where the writer leaves the truth they did not yet know they were telling. The trick I had told my students every September for 38 Septembers was to stop staring at the subject of the sentence and to start asking what the room behind the subject was furnished with. A great writer can lie about a face. No writer, however careful, can lie about a wallpaper, a window, a particular kind of afternoon light falling on a particular kind of floorboard. I was not yet ready to know what the wallpaper of Henry's photograph was telling me, but I was ready to look.
At 8:30 in the morning, Eleanor went into her bedroom, and she got down on her knees in her cardigan and her wool socks, and she pulled out from under the bed a shoebox she had not opened in 11 years. Inside it were 3 things: her father's union pin, oxidized to the color of an old penny, a folded letter she would not read this morning, and a single faded postcard, never mailed, that she had taken from the corner pharmacy on the day her family had loaded the station wagon and left town in 1977. She brought the postcard to the kitchen table. She set it next to the laptop. She lined the postcard's image up alongside the magnified background of Henry's photograph. The boarded storefront, the chipped cursive pharmacy sign, the lamppost tilted at 4 degrees, the black railing, the maple with the broken branch.
It was the same street, from a slightly different angle, in a slightly different year. But it was, beyond any question my teacher's eye could raise, the same street. Ironwood Hollow. I said the name of the town for the first time in 47 years. I said it to an empty kitchen in a cottage on a river 280 miles east of where the town had once been, and I understood, with the slow gathering certainty of a tide coming in, that the man who had written the welcome page, the man who had built the room, the man who had told me there was no script here, only what we choose to bring, that man had been standing on my street the entire time.
Theo called the second emergency video circle at noon. He did not ask Henry's permission. He simply opened the room, and the others arrived, one by one, drawn in by a notification none of them had the strength to ignore. Maggie, in a yellow scarf, eyes already swollen. Iris with her teacup, but no tea in it. Eleanor, in the same cream cardigan she had been wearing for almost 20 hours. And Henry, on his dark tile, audio only, as he had always been.
Henry, we are not here to fight. We are here to be told the truth. And tonight, the truth includes turning on your camera. I am not asking. I am saying the room cannot survive another quiet answer.
Henry, sugar please. Whatever this is, We will hold it. But we have to see your face. Just once. Just so the holding has somewhere to go.
We are listening, Henry.
Henry did not answer for a long time. His audio bar pulsed, briefly, twice, as if he had begun to speak and then chosen not to. Eleanor watched the dark square. Her hand was on the closed oxblood notebook. The postcard was still on the table beside her, face down. Before Henry answered the group, a small sound came from Eleanor's laptop. A direct message, just to her, from Henry. She opened it without thinking. The message contained one line.
I was hoping it would be you.
I read the line 3 times, the first time as a sentence, the second time as a confession, the third time as a door. I had not yet decided whether to walk through. The room I had spent 6 months preparing to enter had a back stairway I had not noticed, and the stairway opened directly into the kitchen of my parents' old house in a Pennsylvania mining town that no longer had a population sign on its highway. I did not know in that moment whether to feel hunted or found. I felt both. I felt them so equally that, for almost a minute, I could not move my hands. There is a particular sensation when a long-buried thing arrives at your kitchen table without warning that is not quite shock and not quite recognition. It is closer to the way a key feels when it turns. After years, in a lock you had forgotten was a lock. Something opens. Something that should have been opened a very long time ago. And the room you walk into is not unfamiliar. It is the room you have been standing outside of, with your hand on the wall, your whole adult life.
Eleanor closed the direct message. She turned back to the group call. She took a breath that she felt, distinctly, in the small bones of her ribs. And she did the thing that 38 years of teaching had prepared her to do, even when she did not want to. She told the truth, in front of witnesses.
I have to share something with all of you. Yesterday I matched the background of Henry's profile photograph to a postcard I have kept under my bed since 1977. The street in his photograph is the main street of the town I grew up in. A town in the Appalachian foothills of western Pennsylvania. A town I have never named to anyone. A town I left when I was 20 years old, after my father, who was a union safety inspector, tried to file a report on a mine foreman whose negligence had killed a young miner.
Oh, Eleanor.
I knew it. I am sorry, Eleanor. I am so deeply sorry, but I knew there was a hook somewhere. The whole community is built around her arrival. Henry, you are going to have to talk now.
Theo, let him speak before you decide what he was.
The room did not so much fracture as dissolve. Maggie was crying. Theo was leaning so close to his camera that his goatee was distorted in the lens. Iris was very still. Eleanor was holding her father's union pin in her left hand, where she had picked it up out of the shoebox without remembering doing so, and Henry's tile was still dark.
And then I did the thing I have been most ashamed of in this entire story. I asked the question out loud. The whole question. The cynical question. The question a teacher should not ask, because a teacher knows that the cynical question is almost always the one that makes the speaker feel briefly smart, and then permanently smaller. Henry, did you build this entire community to find me? Was the welcome page, the project, the cartography, all of it? Was it a long approach to the only person in your life you wanted to make pay for whatever your family did to mine? Tell me now. Because I have spent 47 years never asking, and I am not going to spend one more day not asking.
There was a silence on the call, so complete that Eleanor could hear, very faintly, the river outside her cottage moving against its banks. Then she did something she had not done in any of the previous calls. She closed the laptop. She closed it gently, the way one closes a book at the worst chapter, and she sat in the kitchen as the screen light went out and the room went almost dark.
I sat in the dark for a long time. I held my father's union pin in my cupped hands. It was the first time I had held it since the morning he died. The metal was cold, the way small hard things are always cold when you have not warmed them yourself. I thought about my father. I thought about the night the windows broke. I thought about the way he never once looked back when we drove east. And I asked myself the question Henry's welcome page had asked, but in my own voice for the first time. Not as a quote, not as a polished sentence, as a real question, asked by a real woman, in a dark kitchen, with her father's pin in her hands. What does time redefine, when you are willing to let it? Does it redefine the foreman? Does it redefine the report my father filed? Does it redefine the boarded pharmacy? Does it redefine the dark square on the screen? Does it redefine, finally, me? I did not have the answer, but I understood, sitting there in the dark, that the only honest thing left for me to do was to open the laptop again and listen to whatever Henry had stayed on the call long enough to say. Whether or not it was the answer I had asked for, whether or not the answer was clean enough for me to take it home.
Eleanor opened the laptop. The call was still going. Maggie was still there. Theo was still there. Iris was still there. And the dark square had become, for the first time since Eleanor had joined the room, a face. Henry was a tall, lean man in a charcoal wool sweater. His beard was white and close-cropped. His eyes were deep-set, the color of weak tea, set in a face that had been outdoors for many decades. He was sitting in a converted barn somewhere in the Berkshires, and behind him, on a wooden shelf, Eleanor could see, faintly, the small steel pendant of an oak leaf hanging from a peg.
He looked like a stranger. He looked like someone I had always known. Both of those things, at once, were true.
Eleanor, I am going to answer your question. I am going to answer all of it. And when I am done, I will not ask any of you to stay. I will only ask that you let me say the whole thing once, out loud, in a room with people in it. I have not done that in 40 years. My name is Henrik Lowell. My father was Foreman Howard Lowell. He was the man your father, Inspector Marsh, tried to expose in the summer of 1977 for the negligence that killed a young miner named Daniel Quinn. My father was not run out of town. My father was protected by the company. Your father was the one they ran out. Your father was the honest man. My father was the one who let an honest man pay for his cowardice. I have known this since I was 19 years old. When I was 20, I left Ironwood Hollow too. I went to engineering school. I built bridges for 30 years. I was married twice. I failed both of those marriages because I could not bring myself, on any honest night, to tell either woman what my last name had cost an inspector and his daughter in a town I had not been brave enough to go back to. I told myself, for 40 years, that I was simply a private man. I was not a private man. I was a man hiding behind privacy, the way some men hide behind religion, and other men hide behind their work. 3 years ago, I retired. I went back to Ironwood Hollow for the first time. I stood on the corner where the pharmacy had once been. I took the photograph that some of you have studied. I was not photographing a street. I was photographing a debt. I came home, and I built the Eden Project. Not to find a community for myself. I knew, before I built it, that I was not allowed to belong to it. I built it as a place where my lifelong isolation could finally be useful, where I could hold a door open for other people without contaminating them with my name. I did not know you would walk through it, Eleanor. I hoped. I did not know. The night you joined the room, I recognized your name, because there is only one Eleanor Marsh who could have been 20 years old in that town in 1977, and there is no version of my life in which I forget her father's name. I did not contact you. I did not steer the project toward you. I did, however, write the welcome page sentence after I knew you had read it. I did write the words about time and the real story, knowing that an English teacher would underline them. That much, I confess. The rest of the room I built honestly. I did not leak the document. I would not. But I am the reason a stranger looked. I am the reason this room has shadows in it. I am the reason you, Maggie, are crying tonight. I am the reason you, Theo, were right to be suspicious, even though you were suspicious of the wrong specific thing. I am the reason you, Iris, have been holding a teacup with no tea in it for almost an hour, and I am the reason you, Eleanor, have your father's pin in your hand. I did not build Eden to find a home. I built it because I owed your father a garden.
And in that moment, in a kitchen on a river in the Hudson Valley, with my father's pin warming against my palm, with 3 other faces on a screen in front of me, with a man I had spent 6 months suspecting and 47 years not knowing I had been waiting for, I understood that the word offering and the word secrecy can sometimes be the same word, spoken by a different mouth.
Three days later, the cottage on the river was quiet again. The leaves outside the kitchen window had finished turning. The river had gone the color of old pewter. Eleanor woke a little later than usual, the way a person wakes after a long, honest cry, with the soft surprise of being still inside her own body. She put the kettle on. She listened to it find its small voice. She made coffee in the porcelain mug her husband had given her on their 30th anniversary, and she carried the mug to the kitchen table, where the oxblood notebook had been sitting for 3 days, unopened.
I did not know whether Henry would come back to the room. I did not know whether the room itself would survive what had happened in it. The Eden Project had paused. Maggie had written me a long, kind letter. Theo had written me a short, careful one. Iris had sent me 3 words, which were, "Thank you, Eleanor," and nothing else. Henry had sent nothing. He had told me in his confession that he would not. I was, for the first morning in a long time, in a story whose next page had not been written by anyone yet. I was not afraid of that. I noticed, with a small surprise, that I was not afraid of that.
She opened the notebook. She turned past the maps, past the careful copies of Iris's sentences, past the small notes from the night of the leak. She turned to the first underlined sentence, the one she had copied out in plum-colored ink on the night she had first read it aloud to an empty cottage. She read it once, silently. Then she closed the notebook, and she said the second clause aloud, by herself, in the kitchen, the way a woman says a sentence she has finally earned.
Only when you understand that does the real story finally begin. It was no longer Henry's sentence. It was no longer the welcome pages sentence. It was no longer a quote at all. It was something a 67-year-old woman had said, by herself, on a Wednesday morning in a cottage on a river, with a cup of coffee cooling in front of her. The sentence had stopped being a pose. It had become a coordinate. I spent my entire life being the chronicler of other people's stories. I taught my students to read the chronicles of writers who had been dead for 2 centuries. I sat with my husband through the chronicle of his illness, and I underlined the difficult sentences for him, until he could not see them anymore. I held my father's chronicle in my body for 47 years, in the form of a postcard in a shoebox under a bed, in a town I would not name. I have been, for as long as I can remember, the woman who keeps the chronicle. I am, for the first time, beginning to understand that there is a different way to be inside a life. Not as a chronicle, as a coordinate. A coordinate is not a story. It is a place a story can find you. It is the corner where, on a particular Tuesday in late October, you are willing to be where you are, even if you do not yet know what is going to happen in the next chapter.
Eleanor thought that morning of Maggie. Maggie, somewhere in Savannah, was almost certainly laughing at something nobody else had said yet, in a video tile in another room. Theo was almost certainly writing a sentence in his memoir that he would, by lunch, decide to delete. Iris was almost certainly painting a small watercolor of a garden that did not yet exist. They were each, in their own way, becoming coordinates. The room had not failed. The room had simply become honest. At a little past 9, Eleanor put on her cardigan and her wool socks, and she carried her coffee out onto the small back porch of the cottage. The river was wide and slow that morning. A pair of mergansers were working the shallows. The maple at the corner of the yard had finally let go of the last of its leaves. She stood there for a long time without sitting down.
I did not know what tomorrow was going to bring. I did not know whether Henry would write to me. I did not know whether I would write to him. I did not know whether the room would reopen, or whether the project I had thought was a community had been, all along, a slow, gentle teaching, the kind a man builds when he cannot stand to teach with his name on the door. I did not know. And I noticed that not knowing was no longer a punishment. Not knowing was the place where the next honest sentence would arrive, when it was ready, in a voice I could not yet hear.
Eleanor lifted her coffee. She watched the mergansers. She listened to the cold, thin sound of the river. She thought, for a small moment, of her father, of the way he had never once looked back as the station wagon pulled out of Ironwood Hollow in the late summer of 1977. She thought of how, all of her life, she had assumed that not looking back was the brave thing. She thought, this morning, that perhaps not looking back was simply the only thing he had been able to do that day, and that the brave thing was something else. The brave thing was being willing, 47 years later, to look in any direction at all, including forward, including sideways, including toward a man on a screen who had told the truth in a single quiet barn.
If you have been waiting for permission, this is your permission. You do not have to know what your next chapter is. You only have to be willing to be where you are, with the questions still open in your hands. That is enough. That has always been enough. Find the corner of your own kitchen, the one where the morning light falls. Stand in it. Let the question stay a question. The coordinate is where the story finds you. Time redefines everything, and only when you understand that does the real story finally begin. I know that, now. I am 67 years old, and I am finally beginning.
The Echoes in the Digital Garden. A Porch Light story for anyone willing to be where they are.